A few years ago, Boston premiered the Pulitzer Prize-winning opera Madame Whitesnake. That work has since become a full-grown trilogy with music by 3 different composers and with performances in September at the Emerson Cutler Majestic Theatre. Our guest is one of the composers for the opera Naga, Scott Wheeler. Thank you very much for being with us again, Scott.
Thanks for coming.
First of all, talk about the story. For people who don't know anything about this, Madame Whitesnake,
yes.
The Chinese connection, what is it all about?
Yes. Madame Whitesnake, I understand, is a very well-known folk character for Chinese culture, for Chinese people. Not that I would know this. But Cerise Jacobs, who's our librettist, is ethnic Chinese, although she grew up in Singapore, and she's lived in Boston for many years. So when she did write this opera back 11 years ago, when she wrote the libretto for Madame Whitesnake, quite a number of years ago, she reached to this folk character. And then she started inventing, really, and inventing all sorts of adventures for this character, which are not generally known, I guess, are not really part of Chinese folk mythology. She's really a librettist. She's an opera librettist. So what she decided was that Madame Whitesnake, now some of this may be actual folk material and others of it, I don't know how much of it she invented, but she has this companion snake, the green snake named Xiaoqing. And Xiaoqing used to be a man who was in love with Madame Whitesnake, but she rejected him. He tried to force himself on her, and he was changed into a snake. She was changed into a snake for her evil, and he was allowed to change into a snake to be her companion. So he's sort of a she. It's a somewhat of a transgender character, actually, that she created there with this green snake. And we use this in the opera by casting it as a countertenor, which is a male alto. So in my opera Naga and in Paolo Prestini's opera Gilgamesh, both of them are being sung by the wonderful countertenor Anthony Roth Costanzo, who sings at the Met and English National Opera and all over the place. Anyway, so Madame Whitesnake is this folk character, but really the way Cerise has conceived the character, I think, is more of an operatic trope rather than a folk story. Some people say it might be like a fairy tale. I think it's closer to fantasy science fiction as far as its genre, and opera has always loved fantasy and science fiction. Think of the Ring Cycle, and many Baroque operas with their gods and goddesses and things like that. It's a little along those lines.
Well, you have a lot of experience. You've written operas before, music for theater, and
yes.
So what did you do to make this engaging?
Well, it was hugely engaging just to read it. It was hysterical. It's so imaginative. I mean, most people, if they say they want to write an opera libretto, I don't know, they're writing a play, or they're writing a poem, or they're writing a video, or you know, something else. But Cerise has absolutely written an opera, and it feels so operatic, what she has conceived of. So I just said, well, let's go with this. What does it mean to have a libretto be operatic? Well, one of the things is it allows people to sing at the same time. In a play, you can have people speaking over each other at the same time, but it's a moment of jumble. In opera, it's actually a moment of clarity. Strangely enough, ironically.
And it's more show than tell, too.
Well, sure. You have, in many an opera, what happens is you have this character over on this part of the stage, and this one over here, and this one over here, and this one back here, who they don't see and is listening to them, each one expressing their own thoughts and feelings. And the accompaniment encompasses everybody. This opera is full of that, is full of ensembles. And what happens is that you've set it up with all the various solos, and then it blossoms into this musical thing where you say, oh, wow, I can see where everybody is. All the places where that happens are everybody's favorite places in classic operas and in my opera so far as how people are reacting.
We're talking with Boston area composer Scott Wheeler. I want to ask you about music for voice and music for instruments, because
Yes.
The human voice drives things, even when we don't have a singer in the score. But I want to bring up one example. You had a piece called The New Love Song Waltzes. I guess this is a tribute to Brahms here, maybe?
Of course
Right,
it is.
right.
Of course it is. Yes, it is for the exact Brahms ensemble of 4 singers and piano duet, two people playing one piano. And Brahms had some kind of love song poetry that he found it's not especially distinguished, and I went to very distinguished poetry by Shakespeare and Donne for mine, and decided to just see if I could write something that would be something that really superior amateurs could sight read. I don't think there are too many who could actually sight read my score, but it's not that hard, and that it feels like a waltz and it feels like entertaining music, but of some workmanship, as in the Brahms.
And we're going to bring up an excerpt from that.
Thank you.
It was a lover and his lass, with a hey and a ho and a hey nonny no, that o'er the green cornfield did pass in springtime.
I want to ask you about what another person that this piece reminded me of. I remember the settings of Ben Jonson by Irving Fine, The Hourglass.
Yes, of course.
Yes, he was a Boston composer. I mean, I guess this is part of your educational background.
Irving Fine is the connection that never was, that should have been, because Irving Fine died in 1962, I believe, and I arrived at Brandeis in 1974. So I worked with Arthur Berger and Harold Shapiro, who were Irving Fine's good friends and colleagues, as my composition teachers in Brandeis in the 70s. But I never actually met Irving Fine himself, but I adored his music. I conducted some of his choral music. I didn't conduct The Hourglass, but I have conducted other works of his. And I knew his wife, his widow, Verna, who died a few years ago, but it's very, very much my heritage.
I want to ask you about the place where this opera, Naga, and the other parts of the cycle are going to be played, because this is familiar territory to you because you're associated with Emerson.
I've been teaching at Emerson College for a long time, and we're going to be at the Cutler Majestic. So that's my home. I teach there. I've conducted there many times. I know the green rooms. I know the pit. And when I was composing Naga, what I did is I put myself in my head conducting right from the exact podium where Carolyn Kwan will be conducting our orchestra starting September 10th. And thinking about that stage and cueing singers and being aware of 1,100 people in the audience in back of me and saying, now, how is this going to feel based on this libretto from Cerise?
All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Scott Wheeler.